Okay, good day, ladies and gents. Hope you can all hear me loud and clear. Just let me know in the live chat. Shout out to everybody in here so far. Just waiting for confirmation that people can hear me. Okay, Warren Jackson says, all good. So yeah, shout out to everybody. I think waffles are great. Haven't seen you for a couple of streams. Good to have you back. If you could all do me a favor and just stick a like on this stream, it really helps with visibility. My past few streams haven't done that well in terms of views, so I'm hoping to get a few more on this one. So if you could just take a second, to just stick a like on the stream. We've got 99 concurrent viewers. If we can get at least 50 likes, that'd be much appreciated. Shout out to Fight Sport Talk. Shout out to GMS, Nightmare, Team Batman Boxing, Striker, Encircled. We got Warren Jackson. We got Iron Mikey, Austin Spears. I think waffles are great. Ocean Blue, big up every time. Sohaz, yes, big up Sohaz. 111. We got Liberty Taker, big up. We got Ryan Watterson. Thank you for joining us. We got Paladin Poker. Big up yourself. Counterpunch Boxing News. Always good to have you here. Mike Oxlong. Foundation Old School. Big up Mike. We got Dominic A as well. Shout out to Dominic A. All right. Some very familiar names in the chat room. Good to have all the Foundation subscribers on board. If we can get a few more likes, get us up to like 50, then I will proceed. We're on 44, only need 6 more likes. If you can just stick a like on this stream, it's much appreciated. So yeah, just 5 more likes and we'll start this. There we go. All right. So we got a lot to discuss in today's stream, a lot, because we've obviously had the weigh-ins. We've had the situation with Martin Bakole. There's lots of pictures flying around and speculation about how much he's going to weigh. Is he really going to have a chance in this fight, given the short notice and what have you? We'll discuss it all, okay? So let's start off with going through the fights from the bottom of the bill to the top. There are some minor fights on there which we're not even going to bother talking about in this stream, but I'm going to stick to the main fights on the card. So starting off with Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith. And as we go through, I'm going to give you guys my predictions. I have, I think, given predictions for all these fights before, somewhere or another on my channel. If not in a video, then on the community tab on my channel page. So Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith. Both guys made weight, obviously. And the weigh-ins that were streamed live were ceremonial weigh-ins for the most part. The heavyweight weigh-ins might have been real because heavyweights don't have to make a particular weight. But the other weigh-ins that were not heavyweight fights, they were ceremonial. The real weigh-ins took place earlier on in the day, okay? So for Joshua Buatsi against Callum Smith, Buatsi weighed in bang on the light heavyweight limit of 100 excuse me, if I got this right, Joshua Buatsi I think weighed in bang on 175 pounds. I might have got that wrong. It was either 174 or 175. I think it was bang on the 175 limit. Callum Smith weighed in at 174.1, so about a pound under the limit. I'm going for Joshua Buatsi to win this fight. We did discuss this yesterday. My reasoning is that I think that Callum Smith is really susceptible to being bullied. He was bullied by John Ryder. He was bullied by Canelo. And of course, he was bullied by Artur Beterbiev. I think that Buatsi is going to be the physically stronger man. And he's physically strong in general. I mean, when have you ever seen Joshua Buatsi get bullied in a fight? He's always the one doing the bullying. And even when he gets outboxed and hit with counters here or there, he manages to find a way to impose his will on his opponent. So I'm expecting the same here. I'm certainly not writing Callum Smith off because He's obviously a former world champion. He's fought at a high level. He's a good counter puncher, and he can hit hard. So if Joshua Buatsi is caught slipping, if he loses concentration, then he could get hurt in there. So he's definitely got to be on his A game. But I do think he's going to be a bit too strong for Callum Smith. And Callum Smith, of course, looks big, as you can see from the screenshot. He's tall and whatnot. But bear in mind, he is coming up from 168 pounds. Joshua Buatsi has been at 175 his whole career. So he's a big light heavyweight, even though he isn't quite as tall as Callum Smith is. He's about 6'2". Callum Smith is about 6'4". So yeah, I got Joshua Buatsi in this one. And I'm going to say he wins the fight on points. I think it's possible he could stop Callum Smith, but one of the weaknesses that I see in Buatsi, which again I spoke about yesterday, is I think he's got suspect stamina, personally. I don't think Buatsi can fight 3 minutes of a round for 12 rounds. I think he has to take a lot of breaks in fights. Even against Willie Hutchinson, he had to take a lot of breaks. So yeah, I'm going to go for Buatsi on points in this one. Moving on to the next fight. Agit Kabayel, Zhang. Now, this, for me, is one of the most difficult fights to predict. And I just noticed Abdu Rozik there in the bottom right of the picture. I never noticed it when I took this screenshot. The Abdu Rozik with a tiny little belt was on screen. Where's Hasbullah? Anyway, Zhang versus Kabayel. I've been going back and forth on this. There was somebody in yesterday's stream who pointed me towards a fight that Kabayel had. I'm going to make sure I'm accurate about this here. He had this fight, let's have a look now, in 2023 in Germany. This was the fight he had before he fought Maehudov. And it was against a Croatian fighter called Agron Smakiki. I really don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's spelled, the surname that is, Smakici. So Smakisi, who knows how to pronounce it. Anyway, he's a 34-year-old, 6'6" southpaw from Croatia. Athletic, in shape. And he was stopped in 3 rounds by Kabayel, but not before hurting Kabayel quite badly. Had him on kind of rubber legs. He was cracking Kabayel around the head. And this individual from the live stream, excuse me if I've forgotten your name, from yesterday, he said that this to him, this fight, this scare that Kabayel suffered against this opponent is enough to convince him that Zhang is going to do the business. Now, what I will say is, although Kabayel can move, he's got good legs, he showed that back in the days against Derek Chisora, I haven't seen him use that style for quite a long time. And this is one of the reasons that I'm thinking maybe I should change my prediction, because originally I was going to pick Kabayel, but now I'm thinking maybe I should switch to Zhang, because I don't see Kabayel beating Zhang boxing the way that he has over his past several fights, right? So, for example, he beat Frank Sanchez on the front foot. He beat Maehudov. He used a little bit of movement against Maehudov, but for the most part, he was quite aggressive, wasn't he? Against that Agron Smakisi, same thing. He was very aggressive in that fight. And most of these others, Pavel Sauer, Kevin Johnson, he's been on the front foot. He's being aggressive. He's throwing body shots. He's throwing a lot of volume. That's what he's been doing for the past few years. I mean, maybe the past 4 years or more. Can he really switch it up to start moving against Zhang? Maybe he can. I mean, he weighed in 241 pounds for this Zhang fight. Zhang weighed in 287.5. So the weigh-in itself also confuses me, because 241 for Kabayel is about his normal weight. That's what he weighed against Maehudov. He normally weighs in, mid 230s to very low 240s. So he's bang on his normal weight here, the 32-year-old Kabayel. Whereas Zhang is actually heavy here again. Now we remember how poor he looked against Joseph Parker. The way other than the 2 knockdowns, he was extremely low volume and gassed terribly badly in the final 3 rounds. In the 12th round, I don't think he threw a punch. He was incredible. And it wasn't a particularly high-paced fight. So Zhang has got really terrible stamina. And his stamina appears to be worse the heavier he is. Now, against Deontay Wilder, he was 282. Well, a shade under 283. Against Parker, where he lost, he was 291. For the Joyce rematch, he was 287. For the first Joyce fight, 278. I would have preferred to see him come in for this fight a similar weight to what he was in the first Joyce fight. You know, I think the lighter the better. I mean, not too light for Zhang, but I reckon around, you know, the high 270s is a good weight for Zhang. But these days, yeah, he's not in the high 270s, is he? He's more likely in the high 280s. As I say, against Parker, 291. That was low 290s. Joyce, second time, 287. So, yeah, I'm confused about this fight. I'm really going back and forth in my head. To me, it's a pick'em. I can see how both guys win it. It's just that, you know, Kabayel hasn't been boxing the way I would have liked him to have been practicing in the run-up to a Zhang fight. Moving around, fleet-footed, basically replicating the game plan that Joseph Parker implemented against Zhang. That's what he needs to be doing. If he decides to come forward and give it a go, it needs to be in the second half of the fight when Zhang is already tired. If he's doing it early on, there's a very good chance he's going to walk onto something huge. And he's never been hit by anyone remotely as powerful as Zhang. So, God, I'm almost wanting to sit on the fence with this fight and not pick a winner. But I'm going to stick to my original prediction and say Kabayel, but very, very, very tentatively. I've got no confidence or very little confidence in that prediction at all. Would not surprise me if the big man from China got the job done. So there you go. Moving on to the next one here. We've got Virgil Ortiz versus Israel Madrimov. Now, Ortiz weighed in at 153.1. Madrimov weighed in at 152.1. That's interesting because Madrimov, I have to assume most people would think, is the naturally bigger guy, but he weighed in nearly 2 pounds under the super welterweight limit. 2 pounds under the limit. And it wasn't a case of the scales being off, because if they were, then several of the fighters on this card would have weighed in 2 pounds over the limit. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, Madrimov coming in very light and stood next to Virgil Ortiz. Ortiz actually looks like the bigger man, despite the fact that he is coming up through the weight classes, right? He started out at 140, then moved up to 147. He's now 154. To me, he looks the bigger man. And the thing that surprised me, not just the body size of Ortiz compared to Madrimov, but the height. Like, Virgil Ortiz looks a bit taller than Israel Madrimov. I don't know whether maybe Madrimov was wearing flat-soled shoes and Ortiz was wearing shoes that had a bit of a thick sole on them. I'm not sure, but yeah, he appeared to be the taller man. I was expecting Ortiz to be slightly shorter and be ducking underneath Madrimov's shots and so on. But no, he appears to be the slightly taller man. I'm going to stick with my original prediction on this, and I'm taking Virgil Ortiz to win. I'm definitely in a minority, at least amongst my subscribers, who are overwhelmingly picking Madrimov. Yeah, I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm saying Ortiz wins this fight on points. I wouldn't even rule out a stoppage late for Ortiz, but I'm going to say Ortiz on points. Madrimov has the boxing skills. He's got that old school Eastern Bloc Soviet style, which is very effective. But I think that style is more effective against boxers like Terence Crawford. Guys who are going to give him time and space and range and not crash the pocket, as Dwyer likes to say. Ortiz isn't a reckless pressure fighter, but he will run red lights here and there. And he does like to get in there, hit you in the body and so on. And so I think Ortiz's style will be more effective against Madrimov than Terence Crawford's style, where he was trying to box and what have you. Because I think Ortiz is going to impose himself more. Could be wrong, but that's what I'm going for. I'm going for Luis Ortiz to win this fight on points or on a late stoppage. So let's move on to the next one then. Carlos Adamez versus Hamza Shiraz. Now, I've been going back and forth about this fight as well. If these guys were a similar height and naturally a similar weight, I would definitely be taking Carlos Adamez. I think he's versatile, he's explosive, he's got a great punch variety, he is tough, good work rate, throws a lot of shots, got power, speed, all that type of stuff, switch hits. So again, if these guys were a similar size, I'd be going for Carlos Adamez. But of course, they're not a similar size. Hamza Shiraz is much bigger. Adamez started out as a welterweight, and he's moved up now to 160 pounds middleweight. Hamza Shiraz is an enormous middleweight. There was somebody in the live chat yesterday who was saying that Adamez has been sparring David Benavidez and Diego Pacheco for this fight. I mean, that is fantastic preparation, but it all depends on whether you've been doing well enough in those spars with those guys for the sparring experiences to pay off. Because if you've just been getting battered, it may not help you. It may actually hinder you if you're sparring too tough. Now, I don't think he will have been getting battered because he's very wily and tricky and crafty. Carlos Adamez. Shout out to James Clifford for the super chat, by the way. I will get onto your super chat in just a moment and read it out, but thank you very much. I'm just going to finish this thought with regards to Hamza Shiraz and Carlos Adamez. So, Shiraz is a very, very big guy at 160 pounds. He's really come into his own. He trains in America. He's trained by an American-based coach. He's sparred in those tough gyms. He's been in all sorts of situations, I'm sure, and come up against all sorts of styles in those gyms. So I don't think he'll be particularly shocked by what Adamez does. I think Adamez is going to have success early. But once Shiraz, and this is what I'm expecting to happen, once Shiraz establishes his jab and starts getting into a rhythm, I think he's going to take over the fight. I could be completely wrong, okay? But yeah, I think Shiraz's reach and his power and his physical strength and his ability to impose himself will win the day in the end. And just to put things in perspective, Adamez weighed in at 158.1 pounds. So again, 2 pounds under the 160 pound limit, which shows you what a small middleweight he is. Shiraz weighed in at 159, a pound under the limit. He's straining at the leash in this particular weight class. It's possible, I'm not predicting this, but it's possible that this might be his last fight at 160 pounds, particularly if he loses. I would expect him to move up right afterwards, depending on the nature of the loss. And even if he wins, he might only stick around for 1 or 2 more fights in the weight class. We shall see. But yeah, I fully understand why there are quite a lot of people out there picking Adamez to win this fight. Because again, if they were a similar size, I'd be picking him. But I do think Shiraz's, physical dimensions, power, strength, and so on will be a little bit too much in the end. But we'll see. It's a good fight. So get into the super chat then before we move on to the other fights and the other weigh-ins. James Clifford says, Hatman, do you think Bakole has to do a Bone Crusher Smith versus Tim Witherspoon and just go all out, similar to when he was a last-minute substitute? It really depends on how good a shape Martin Bakole is in. We're all speculating about what shape he's in. Billy Nelson, his coach, has done many interviews over the past few weeks even. And he's spoken about Martin Bakole being in the gym sparring. This was long before he got this fight with Joseph Parker. I'm talking about over the past month or so. I've seen interviews with Billy Nelson talking about Martin Bakole sparring this afternoon. Do you know what I mean? Back then. So he might be in better shape than we realize, at least in terms of cardiovascular fight fitness, because there is a difference between that and aesthetic shape. Martin Bakole, for the longest time, has been a guy who looks fat and out of shape, but he's actually cardiovascular fit, right? You look fat and out of shape against Jared Anderson, but he was cardio fit. He looked even more fat and out of shape against Carlos Takam, but he was cardio fit. So it all depends on where he's at in terms of cardio fitness. If he's not in any type of shape, if he's only got, let's say, 5 good rounds in him, then absolutely he needs to go out there just like Bone Crusher Smith in the Tim Witherspoon rematch and lay it all on the line and try to take Joseph Parker out as quickly as he can. Because, as soon as the gas tank goes, Joseph Parker's going to box circles around him. And he might even step in and try to hurt Martin Bakole and do what Michael Hunter did all those years ago and stop him. So yeah, it really depends. And it's only Martin Bakole who knows. And maybe Billy Nelson. They're the ones who know. We don't know. We can only speculate. It's going to be interesting to find out, right? So shout out to James Clifford for the super chat. Very, very, very much appreciated. So let's move on then from Adamez, Shiraz. Again, I'm picking Shiraz in that fight on points. Then we'll talk about the Parker Bakole fight. So Bakole, and this is how crazy it is. Bakole, as far as I'm aware, is still in the air as we speak because he's had to fly from Congo. And I don't know whereabouts he was in the Congo, but there might not have been a lot of flights from there. Congo's got a lot of issues right now. It's a huge country. When people say there's a war going on in Congo, well, there's a war going on in a certain part of Congo. Congo's always had, for the longest time, conflicts taking place within it. But it's an enormous country. So certain regions have conflict and other regions are, there's peace. So anyway, Bakole had to wait around a long time to catch a flight out of Congo to Ethiopia. Then from Ethiopia to catch a connecting flight to, I think it's Dubai or Abu Dhabi, somewhere in the UAE. And then from there, another flight to Saudi Arabia. And you know how it is when you've got connecting flights. There's usually delays. Sometimes you might even miss a flight because of a delay. The estimate that they're giving at the moment is that Martin Bakole will land in Saudi Arabia at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning local time. 2 a.m. That's the most recent estimate. You could push that even further back to 3 a.m., 4 a.m., depending on delays, maybe even beyond that. But let's say luck is on his side and he arrives in Saudi at 2 a.m. He's not going to get to sleep till 4 a.m. with the excitement of everything and, the travel and being on the plane, so on and so forth. So I'll give you some pictures here. This is one of the pictures that people are talking about from the 14th of February, a week or so ago. Martin Bakole from this angle looking unbelievably fat. I mean, people are saying here he must be 330 pounds or more. Okay, we'll get onto his previous weights in a second. But then there are other pictures, more recent, like this. You can see he's at an airport here, I think in Congo. And whereby he stood up rather than hunched over, which obviously makes your belly bulge more. He stood up. It doesn't look as bad, but he's still very, very heavy, I'm sure. He's got the Gucci drip on. Here's Martin Bakole again in the airport off to Saudi Arabia. There's another picture of him about to get on the Ethiopian Airlines plane. Well, either just about to get on or just gotten off the plane. And then there he is in his seat, right? Martin Bakole. And I put a post up on the community tab on my YouTube page where I said that Martin Bakole actually is what John Fury just pretends to be, which is a man who's willing to fight anyone, anytime, any place. Literally. Martin Bakole is about that life. He's about that action. He's a real fighting man. And apart from that, as well as that, should I say, in addition to Martin Bakole being a real fighting man, you have to commend Joseph Parker because Parker apparently asked for this fight. They gave Parker a list of opponents, which included Lawrence Okoli, which really would have been the one you would have thought he would go for, right? Because Bakole lives in Dubai. So he's right there. He's only an hour's flight away. So it would have been easier, presumably, to get Lawrence Bakole in because it's just an hour away. And, they know he's local. He's not going to have to adjust to the atmosphere or anything like that. And apparently his name was very much in the mix. But Joseph Parker wanted Martin Bakole because he wanted the credit for beating the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, albeit on 2 days' notice, right? So kudos to both men, but a special shout out to Martin Bakole because, he's in a... Both guys are risking. So Joseph Parker is WBO interim champion. Martin Bakole has got a fight with Efe Jagba for the IBF final eliminator. So both guys are risking, but Martin Bakole's risking more because he hasn't had a camp. Joseph Parker's had 10, 12 weeks. He's been in Saudi 3 weeks. So he's had all the time in the world to adjust to the atmosphere, the climate, so on and so forth. Not that it's particularly hot in Saudi right now. It's actually not. It's quite cool. But still, every country is kind of a different atmosphere. There's a bug going around in Saudi. Apparently that's what Daniel Dubois came down with. Perhaps that's what Floyd Schofield came down with as well. So you want to get in country sooner rather than later to just adjust to everything and become comfortable with everything, with the surroundings and the environment. Martin Bakole's had none of that. I mean, long haul flight with loads of connections, that's going to wipe you out. As far as jet lag, there shouldn't be, under normal circumstances, jet lag between Congo and Saudi because the time difference is only 2 hours, right? It's negligible. It's nothing. But again, given the fact he's coming off a long-haul flight, multiple changes of plane and what have you, there might well be jet lag, especially the fact that he's going to arrive so late in Saudi Arabia. Again, he might not get to sleep till 4 a.m. at the earliest. So what's his day going to look like tomorrow? He's going to be waking up in the afternoon because he's going to need to get enough sleep. He's going to be waking up in the afternoon. His body clock's going to be all off. Then he's going to have to, get some food in, get his body moving with some training, a little bit of light training just to get the blood circulating. So it's a big, big gamble by Martin Bakole and Billy Nelson. Let's see if it pays off. If it does, you got to say it's a master stroke, And Martin Bakole really is a true fighting man, a road warrior willing to fight any man born from his mother, anytime, any place. The man who John Fury only pretends to be. So, there he is on the plane. Now, again, talking about Martin Bakole's weight, he looks heavy here. I don't know when this training footage was actually shot. It was uploaded on the 12th of February, but whether it was actually shot then, I don't know, okay? But here in this training footage, he actually looks in pretty good shape. So has he piled on a load of weight very quickly in a couple of weeks? Some people can, trust me. I can. If I start eating loads of, carbs and rice and, food like that, I'll pile an incredible amount of weight on very quickly. Yeah. Maybe Martin Bakole's like that. I don't know. But if this actually was recent, if this footage is actually from the 12th of February, let's say before he left Scotland, when he was still with Billy Nelson, I don't know where this is. It could be in the Congo or somewhere else. But if it was in Scotland, then maybe he's, as I said earlier on, cardio fit. And it's just an aesthetic thing where he's really fat. Obviously, he'll move slower with all those extra pounds on him. But being cardio fit is the most important thing. So we won't know until fight night where Martin Bakole's at. But he's got a lot of challenges to get through here, physical challenges. And if he manages to come out on top, he deserves all the credit in the world, because if he beats Joseph Parker and does so convincingly, everybody's going to be saying, just imagine what he would have done to him with a full camp if he's beat him on 2 days' notice. So, very, very intriguing. And one final thought on this, right? The fact that this fight is happening, to me, is indicative of the way Frank Warren views Joseph Parker. Frank Warren promotes him. Do you seriously think that if Joseph Parker had pulled out on fight week, Frank Warren would have allowed, yes, I'm going to use the word allowed. Do you think Frank Warren would have allowed Daniel Dubois to fight Martin Bakole? Because in my opinion, there is absolutely no way in hell, no way on God's green earth would Frank Warren have been okay with Dubois fighting Martin Bakole as a last-minute replacement. I mean, am I buzzing here? Am I tripping? I think that Joseph Parker is one of these fighters for Frank Warren who he uses as cannon fodder to some extent, as a sacrificial lamb, as somebody who can act as a buffer between his cash cow fighters and the danger men out there. He'll put them in the way first. Oh, fight this guy. Fight Joe Parker first. Then maybe down the line you'll get a shot at Daniel Dubois. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, in my personal opinion, there is absolutely no way. If Parker had been the one to have pulled out, there's no way that Warren would have been willing to put Dubois in with Bakole. Even though Bakole ain't had a camp and all that kind of stuff, I just can't see it. I think Frank Warren sees Daniel Dubois as being far too precious for that. Shout out to Workstation for the super chat. Much appreciated. He says, I know I take the mick out of Captain Nose here, but I do rate Bakole. As you mentioned, he's similar in style to Jarrell Miller, but more technical. And I think this jovial attitude he has towards boxing makes him a threat. Well, yeah, he does certain things similar to Miller, but I don't think they're that similar stylistically. They're both enormous men who come forward and throw loads of shots and put you under pressure. So they're similar in that way. But yeah, I think that Bakole is a lot more dimensional. I think he's got a better boxing brain. I think he's more creative with his offense. Jarrell Miller's very, very basic. You know, he comes forward, walks you down, bullies you, not really a serious puncher. Martin Bakole, I think, hits a lot harder than Jarrell Miller. And I mentioned this in a previous video or live stream, but there was a time when Jarrell Miller was in the Tyson Fury camp in Morecambe. There's pictures of it. And there was a video clip of Jarrell Miller. He appeared to be coming out of the gym, and he said that he just got his butt kicked in sparring. Now, at the time, I assumed that Tyson Fury had kicked his butt, but it turns out it was actually Martin Bakole. Yeah, Martin Bakole apparently bashed up Jarrell Miller in Tyson Fury's gym in Morecambe. And that is why Jarrell Miller was so certain that Martin Bakole was going to beat Jared Anderson. If you remember, in the run-up to that fight, during fight week, there was a confrontation between Jarrell Miller and Jared Anderson's team, and there was some beef between the two fighters. And Jarrell Miller kept saying, Bakole's going to destroy this guy, because he found out himself firsthand from sparring Martin Bakole that the guy's dangerous. So yeah, Martin Bakole's very strong. And one of the things that really impresses me about Bakole is the ferocity of his attacks. Like, for a big guy like that with a big pot belly, 300 pounds plus in some fights. In fact, maybe 300 pounds is the highest he's been. Let me just check his box rec here. Going to go into Martin Bakole's box rec. Let's find it. So, all right, event. Martin Bakole. He was 299.5 pounds against Carlos Takam. That might have been his career heaviest. So he was basically 300 pounds against Takam. All right. And for this fight, people are guessing well over 300 pounds. They could be correct. But yeah, for a guy that big, even in the Takam fight, when he decides to let his shots go, the man is ferocious, and the shots are thrown with surprising speed. And he goes into like this overdrive mode where he just throws and throws and throws and throws relentlessly. He doesn't necessarily do it from the opening bell. I mean, if you look at the Jared Anderson fight, for example, he starts the fight off kind of tentatively behind a jab. Just looking at Anderson and seeing the moves he makes, downloading data. He's just sticking his jab out there. He's letting Anderson hit him in the body and, do whatever. And then once he sees something, he's like, okay, I'm going to throw a particular shot, which was the uppercut in the first round against Anderson. Wobbled him, followed up, put him down. Then in the second round, all of that standing off and jabbing is completely gone from Bakole. He comes steaming out at Anderson 100 miles an hour, throwing all these vicious punches at him. And he was like that for the remainder of the fight. Obviously, it was over in the fifth. And it was a similar thing against Carlos Takam. If you go back and watch that Takam fight, Bakole comes out kind of circumspect behind the jab, looking to time Carlos Takam with counters and whatnot. But then Billy Nelson tells him in the corner, okay, enough with all the boxing stuff. Like, go and hurt this guy. And Bakole comes out like a man possessed. He's just throwing all these combinations at Carlos Takam. Relentless. Even on the inside when they're clinching, Bakole's constantly punching. He's getting a hand free. He's throwing double left hooks, body and head. So he has this gear he's able to go into, this high gear that is very impressive for a guy of his size. When he goes in, he's actually quite scary when he goes into that high gear because he's just so big and he's swinging these huge shots and there's loads and loads and loads of the shots relentlessly coming at you. I mean, a very, very difficult guy to keep off once he goes into that high gear. You want to try, if you can, if it's possible, to keep Martin Bakole in the lower gear, in first or second gear where he's just throwing a few jabs at you and, looking for counters. And I think the way that you might be able to do that is by giving him plenty of movement. But we should talk about the weights, or at least the weight, because we don't yet have Bakole's weight, at least not as far as I'm aware. Joseph Parker weighed in at 267 pounds for this fight. Now, I don't know how well that would have worked for him against Dubois. I suspect not very well, but it seems to be a strategic thing. They decided they needed to pile on a load of, extra muscle or whatever. But I'm thinking that it's going to be a disadvantage against Bakole because you want all the speed over him that you can have, particularly foot speed, to maneuver around and keep him just throwing single shots at you. If Joseph Parker is stationary and Martin Bakole's able to get into that high gear and start swinging, Parker is going to find it even more difficult than he did against Joe Joyce. Because obviously Joe Joyce was able to bully Parker and wear him down with that type of approach. Martin Bakole is a lot faster than Joe Joyce. He's a similar size, bigger than Joyce, right? I think they're around the same height, but in terms of body weight, he's actually heavier than Joyce. And he's faster. He can fight at a higher pace. He's more creative with his offense. He throws every punch in the book, straight shots, hooks, uppercuts, overarm shots, jabs. Sometimes he'll actually jab with the right hand out of an orthodox stance, poke the right hand out a couple of times, then come with a big left. So he's got very creative offense. And yeah, I think if he manages to pin Joseph Parker the way that Joe Joyce did, Parker is in a world of trouble. I'm just telling you, he's in a world of trouble if he gets pinned. He's going to need to keep moving. But how well can Parker keep moving at 267 pounds? It's interesting that he's gone as high as that because this is a career heaviest. To put it in perspective, for the Zhang fight, he was 247. So he's a full 20 pounds heavier here than he was against Zheli Zhang. 20 pounds. All right. Now, that fight was nearly a year ago. So it's not like he's put the weight on in a short space of time. This is not a matter of him being out of shape. This is a matter of him strategically gaining muscle, maybe in the legs and the chest, the shoulders, the back, whatever. But you're not going to be faster with all that muscle than you were at 247 against Zhang. And for me, I would want, if I was part of Team Parker, him to come in around that weight, 247 for Bakole, or even Dubois, personally. He was 245 against Deontay Wilder, 250 against Simon Keane. He was 239, again, this is just back in 2023, against a guy called Opilu. That was a fight he won in the first round. He was 245 against Jack Massey, 255 against Joe Joyce. I think the Joyce fight was his previous career heaviest, and he looked big and bloated even then, right? At 255 against Joe Joyce. So for him to be coming in, as massive, 10 pounds heavier than he was in the Joyce fight, and the Joyce fight looked way too heavy. To me, it's a concern. But of course, there are also concerns on the Bakole side that we've already spoken about. The fact that he could be wiped out from the journey, the fact that he hasn't had a camp, the fact that he may not get, if not enough sleep, his body clock might be completely out of whack because he's probably not going to get to sleep till at least 4 a.m. So even though the time difference between Congo and Saudi is negligible, it's only 2 hours, jet lag has to do with what time you get to sleep and what time you wake up. So, Bakole has got a lot of challenges he's facing here, but so does Joseph Parker. So it's a very intriguing one. All of the preamble out of the way, if I'm to give a prediction for this fight, if Bakole had a full camp, I'd be picking him. Because he hasn't had a full camp, and I don't know what type of shape he's in, and I don't know how all of these different things, the long haul traveling and the sudden nature of this fight, I don't know how all that's affected him. I have to pick Joseph Parker to win. Yeah, just based upon the prep of both guys. He's had the better prep. He's comfortable in Saudi, so on and so forth. I have to go with Joseph Parker on points. That's what I'm predicting. I could be wrong. Again, if it was fully fit, plenty of prep, Martin Bakole, I'd be picking him instead. In fact, I'd probably pick him to stop Parker in about maybe 9-10 rounds. But as it is, I got to go Parker on points. What are you guys saying in the live chat? Who are you going for? Shout out to Orca for the super chat. He says, even if Dubois didn't pull out, what on earth was everyone else thinking bringing Parker 267 pounds in against Dubois in the first place? I completely agree. I don't know why he would come in that heavy. I don't know what the thinking is behind it. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I worry for Bakole, looks massive and hasn't slept. Indeed. It's a big challenge for him. Shout out to Striker for his super chat. He says, huge risk for Parker. A loss under these circumstances undoes the goodwill he's been getting the last couple years. Indeed. Jeopardy for both guys for different reasons, right? But yeah, if Parker were to lose this fight, I mean, it's a horrible look, isn't it? To be losing to a fat man who took the fight on 2 days' notice, who's flying halfway across the world long haul, probably jet lagged because of getting to sleep very late. And, Bakole's got to do medicals and all sorts of stuff as well. So how much sleep is he even going to get when he has to do medical and all that type of business? Once he arrives in Saudi, it's crazy. This is literally crazy. Do you know what I mean? Literally crazy. And as other people have said, this might be the greatest replacement for a high-level heavyweight fight since, the greatest replacement for a high-level heavyweight fight since Vitaly Klitschko stepped in for Kirk Johnson against Lennox Lewis. Yeah, this might be the best replacement. That was a better replacement, obviously. And in that case, both guys had been training for a fight. Lewis wasn't in the greatest of shape because I guess he didn't really rate Kirk Johnson, who was a Canadian fighter about 6'2", and what have you. Lewis came in a career heaviest. And he'd been out the ring a year. He wasn't in the greatest of shape, but he still was in training for a fight. Vitaly Klitschko was in training for a fight on Lewis's undercard. So both guys had full camps. This situation, of course, is very different. With Bakole having no camp. Yeah, no camp at all. So we'll see what a soldier he is and how tough he is. Because dealing with situations like this, you've got to be very, very mentally and physically resilient to be able to go through all that and still perform. So yeah, Striker, shout out again for the super chat. High risk for Parker. A loss under these circumstances would really hurt his reputation, for sure. Massively hurt his reputation. And maybe he's getting, paid still a lot of money. Not too dissimilar to what he was paid for Dubois, possibly. I don't know. Maybe that's why he really wanted to go ahead with it. Maybe they told him that, depending on the opponent, the purse will be different. The more dangerous the opponent, the more we'll pay you, because Turki Al-Sheikh apparently was very keen on Bakole replacing Daniel Dubois. So, yeah, he presented a bunch of names to Parker, and Parker picked Bakole, but maybe we're not being told that he was being offered a lot more money if he picked Bakole than if he'd picked David Adelaye or Lawrence Okoli, or who are the other names on the list now? I forget. But yeah, if he picked one of those guys, he might not have been paid anywhere near as much as he's being paid for the Martin Bakole fight. So we have to factor in that possibility. Shout out to Surviving Sobriety for the super chat. Let me just read his super chat out here. Okay, he didn't actually make a comment, but shout out for the super chat. Jay Jones says, so if Bakole wins, are we calling it a big upset? I don't know whether we can call it a big upset, because, again, if Bakole had a full camp, I reckon he might have been the favorite coming in. So, and we just don't know what type of shape he's in. So I don't know whether we can call it an upset, but it would be an extraordinary feat because of what he's had to go through. Do you know what I mean? Just in terms of the surprise of getting the call, the travel, the long haul flights and all that type of stuff. Pro Cala says, is Bakole the most dangerous 4-round fighter in the heavyweight division? He might be. It might be between him and Zhang, although Dubois is very dangerous throughout a fight, right? Including the first 4 rounds. He's very, very dangerous. Truth Teller Maxwell says he will be at least 315 pounds. So anyway, let's move on from this fight just for a moment, because as Dwyer likes to say, boxing is unfair, because you've basically got the heavyweight, there's the heavyweight division, then there's everything else. Look at us, boxing fans. What are we talking about more? The undisputed light heavyweight, top of the bill, the rematch between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol? Or are we talking about heavyweight fights more? We're talking about the heavyweight fights more. Particularly this, before it was going to be Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker. Now it's Joseph Parker versus Martin Bakole. We love the heavyweights. The heavyweights, in terms of popularity, eclipse the light heavyweights, even though the light heavyweights are really better fighters. This current, elite at light heavyweight, Beterbiev and Bill, they're better fighters than the heavyweights we're talking about. But bigger is better, right? That's what she said. Pause. People are fascinated by the big men because the punches are so heavy and ferocious, and there is generally at heavyweight a higher chance of knockouts and drama, and that's what makes great viewing. That's what makes great television. That's what makes great highlight reels, is knockouts and drama. And it's always more dramatic when you see a big man get knocked flat on his back than when you see a little man get knocked flat on his back. Big men fall like oak trees and crash to the canvas. Do you know what I mean? And people want to see that stuff, including myself. But anyway, we will talk about the top of the bill. Artur Beterbiev, Dmitry Bivol 2. Nip and tuck fight first time around. For me, it could have gone either way. What is Eddie Hearn wearing behind them there? I just clocked Eddie Hearn's jacket. It almost looks like an Averex. I don't think it is, but what is Eddie Hearn actually wearing there? Getting distracted. So yeah, Beterbiev, Bivol 2. If Beterbiev can find a way to up his work rate, because I've seen him in fights in the past where he's been very, very low volume throughout the fight, but other fights where he's thrown a lot more volume. If he can find a way to up his volume against Dmitry Bivol, I think he wins. I don't think he did enough bullying of Bivol first time around. I know it's difficult because Bivol's very, very fast. He's got that great footwork. He's a great counter puncher. He sticks the jab on you. He puts his shots together. And Beterbiev isn't like, let's say, a stereotypical Mexican fighter who's willing to take 3-4 shots to land his own. Beterbiev prefers not to take punishment. Yeah, when he's coming forward. He prefers to be more strategic with his pressure. But I think if he's going to make it decisive against Bivol, he's going to need to take more risks, throw more shots, and be willing to take a few to land his own. If he does that, then I reckon he can win, as I say, more decisively. Because in the later rounds of the fight, the weight of his shots did appear to be taking their toll on Dmitry Bivol. But it's only because he started to land them then. Earlier on in the fight, he really wasn't landing those heavy shots. So I think he needs to up his work rate, take chances, get those gloves landed on Bivol's body, cuffing him around the side of the head, wherever he can hit him. Even if they're not landing clean, just be hitting him somewhere, breaking down his body. And as I say, if he's able to do that, I reckon he wins more decisively. Maybe not by stoppage, but just maybe more comfortably on points this time. It's all big ifs. Maybe Dmitry Bivol comes out, throws more shots, is faster, more aggressive. That could play into Beterbiev's hands, but it could also play into Bivol's hands. Maybe he can make maybe he can make Beterbiev shell up because of the speed disparity. So it's a fascinating one. If I had to pick a winner, I'm going to factor in politics as well, boxing politics. I say Bivol gets it this time. Maybe. Actually, no. Because then you've got the religion thing. No disrespect to any Muslims or anything, but out there in Saudi Arabia, I have seen favoritism in favor of Muslim fighters like Badu Jack. So, factor that in. Do they give it to Beterbiev if it's a close one again? Now I'm gonna say Bivol takes it on points in a close fight, but I don't think anybody will be complaining about the decision. So I'm gonna go Bivol, maybe on not a split. Let's say a majority. Bivol on a majority. I could be completely wrong. Maybe Beterbiev takes it. It's such a close one in my head. It could go either way. But if I'm forced to pick, I want to say Bivol takes it on the cards, which sets up a trilogy, which obviously the money people in boxing, the way boxing politics works, they would like a trilogy because at light heavyweight right now, there's nobody other than, let's say, David Benavidez, who the public are really pressing to see fight one of these guys, So, I don't know. Maybe the politics would work in such a way that they would want Benavidez, and I know they've spoken about this, the Saudis, that they'd want Benavidez to fight the winner of this rather than a trilogy. But again, depending on how good the second fight is, Benavidez might get put on the back burner and they might do a trilogy instead. I'd prefer that not to happen because, as I said on yesterday's stream, I've got no issue with trilogies. I just don't like them being in consecutive fights. Like the great trilogies of the past, between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, their fights were spread out over a number of years. They weren't back-to-back fights, right? Same goes for Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe. Their fights were spread out over a number of years. And you can say the same for several other trilogies, yeah? They spread the fights out over their career. Whereas the money men in boxing today are so cynical that they want the trilogies like back-to-back-to-back fights. It's just, nah, I'm not a fan of it. It holds divisions up and stops things moving and stops us seeing different things, you know, with different fighters. But there you go. That's my take on this one. Going to have a look at what's being said in the chat room here. Shout out to Workstation for the super chat. He says, do you think the shorter layoff might affect Beterbiev more than Bivol, considering Beterbiev spends a year or so out the ring as he's gotten older? I mean, that's a good point that I hadn't considered. So I'm going to have to contemplate that one for a second. Shout out to Mark S for the super chat. He says, big up Hatman, always loving the content. Did you watch the Fisheyes interview regarding Dubois' illness? Very shady. Possibility of cycling off. I haven't seen that. I've seen some people allude to this business. I did see a headline of Frank Warren, as always, you know, screaming and shouting about how stupid people are and, oh, these conspiracy theorists and all this kind of stuff. Look, to me, it's very possible that Daniel Dubois, maybe probable, is simply ill. I mean, Floyd Schofield appears to have gotten ill. Apparently, for one of the previous shows they had in Saudi, loads of people that attended the fight got ill. They have different types of viruses and bugs in different countries. Do you know what I mean? So it's very possible that that's all it is. Dubois is just ill. It doesn't necessarily have to be a PED thing. Am I open to the possibility that it is a PED thing? Yes, I'm open to the possibility because I know how shady boxing is. I know how shady the world is. So that's what I'll say. Well, I'm open to the possibility that it could be, you know, Dubois cycling off or this, that, or the other. I tend to suspect it's not that. I tend to suspect that in this instance, it's exactly what is being reported. He just fell ill. I mean, Dubois, when he did that workout the other day, was shirtless. And that's the way he trains in the UK. But going to a different country, in a different atmosphere, a different environment, you know, training shirtless and then you're sweating and your sweat gets cold when you put your shirt back on and all that type of stuff. Maybe he didn't anticipate it was going to be so cold in Saudi, you know? You can mess around and catch a virus. It can easily happen. So while I hear what people are saying with regards to Dubois and cycling off, because, you know, there's nothing wrong with these kind of speculations because we know that there is a lot of PEDs in boxing and in sports in general. So I've got no issue with people speculating on these things, but, you know, people do get ill as well. It doesn't have to be, you know, one or the other. People get ill all the time. And when you're going for a training camp, you're training yourself into the ground. It can actually weaken your immune system for a time because you're punishing your body that much and make you more susceptible to getting colds and flus and all that type of business. So you have to factor that in as well. But shout out to Mark S for the super chat. Shout out to Surviving Sobriety again for his. And yeah, to get back to Workstation's question, it's a very, very good question. Because yeah, Beterbiev hasn't been fighting often. He keeps pulling out of fights with these injuries, which Tunde Ajayi thinks are very suspicious. You know, he thinks that potentially Beterbiev's cycling off, and that's what these quote-unquote injuries are all about. Beterbiev was coming off surgery last time. It's a quick turnaround for this rematch. If he did have injuries, you know, there was a knee or whatever, was the injury exacerbated by the first fight? If it wasn't, then maybe this extra time between the first fight and now will actually benefit Beterbiev. if there was even more extra time, benefit him further. But as it is, it might have benefited him. It's really impossible to know. But it's definitely a good thing to contemplate. So it's a very good question. So yes, it's something we can only speculate about, obviously. Maybe Beterbiev would actually be better if he fought more frequently. You know? Maybe. Sometimes when you reach this age, inactivity can actually make you more prone to injury. Yeah? Your muscles get more stiff, your body gets more stiff, you lose suppleness and what have you. And if you're coming out of, well, you know, Beterbiev is not the guy to be sitting around on a couch, right? This guy's ripped 365. But if you're, you know, coming from your normal life and then going into a camp once a year, maybe your body's not ready for the camp. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you going into hard training like that after resting, it can make you more prone, as I say. Whereas if you're training more regularly, perhaps your body's ready for the training and you won't get injured so much. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but in some instances, I think that might actually be the case. You know, so thank you for the super chat and the question. Andrew Grimbass says, Triple D didn't bring his slippers to Saudi, so I had to withdraw. Okay. Dominic A says, no interviews from Don Charles. Well, there was a brief interview with Don Charles with Sky when Daniel Dubois did his workout on fight week. Was it Monday, Tuesday, whenever Dubois did the workout? They briefly interviewed Don Charles. They asked him a few questions. So I did see that. But Don Charles is kind of conspicuous. He has been quite conspicuous with a lack of interviews since he started training Dubois, particularly over his last couple fights. You know, his absence has been kind of conspicuous. And of course, they're now saying that Dubois might go straight into an Usyk fight, which works very well for Frank Warren, doesn't it? But then, you know, some people are saying that this shows all along that Dubois wasn't going to fight Parker and it was all a setup for the... Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I just think that Frank Warren, being a veteran promoter, thinks very quick on his feet. And again, he's putting this buffer between Daniel Dubois and Martin Bakole, which is Joseph Parker. He'll use Parker as a buffer because he had to deal with the Bakole problem somehow, didn't he, Frank Warren? Yeah. Frank Warren, as far as I'm concerned, was not keen at all for Dubois to fight Bakole. I mean, after the AJ fight, Frank Warren was running around claiming that AJ was a mandatory for Dubois. He was trying to push that. Maybe hoping to bully the IBF into counting that as a mandatory so that he could push the Bakole mandatory way, way, way off into the distance. So Frank Warren has never been keen on that fight for Daniel Dubois. And if Bakole had gone ahead and fought a Jagba and become IBF mandatory, the likelihood is Dubois would have been forced to fight Bakole this year or vacate and look like a duck. Whereas the way this situation is played out, you've got Bakole coming in at 2 days' notice to fight Parker. Warren must be thinking this is a great way to get Bakole sidelined. This is a great way to do it. Yeah, he's only had 2 days' notice for this fight. He's probably not in shape. We'll put Parker in there. If he can outbox Bakole, that's it. Bakole's to the back of the queue again. We don't have to worry about him for Daniel Dubois. We can just put Daniel in with Alexander Usyk next. So these promoters think very quick on their feet. And I suspect that's what's going on here. Mark Hatch says Usyk shouldn't give Dubois the fight. Dominic K says, Frank has the monopoly. Sad times. Eddie is a side chick. He is too. Jay Silver says, Frank's face will be a picture if Bakole KOs Parker. Yeah, imagine Ben Shalom's face as well. Imagine Ben Shalom if Bakole KOs Parker. Mike Oxlong says, got to imagine Turkey is livid though, pulling out last minute like this. Well, you know, those Saudis, they got so much money, they're used to fixing problems by throwing money at them. So to them, this might be pretty routine, to be honest. Problems come up. There's an issue. Throw a few million at it. Solve the issue. Simple. You know what I mean? Solve the issue. Here's some millions. Get it done. That's what happens in a dictatorship, right? There are no checks and balances. It's just like unfettered access to the royal coffers. Evil Uncle Phil says, Dubois in the Boxing King media interview, whole demeanor was he knew he wasn't fighting. I'd have to see it for myself, but maybe Dubois was already ill because it was a process he had to go through. Well, apparently Dubois was given some type of medicine, but the medicine made him fatigued, tired, which, you know, many medications can definitely do. Jay Jones says apparently the doctor stopped it, so he had no choice. Yeah, that's what I heard as well. Yeah, and to Matty says, yeah, antihistamines generally do. Somebody says the doctor was Don Charles. Yeah, but just to reiterate what I've said before, I am not claiming that Martin Bakole is the next big thing in the heavyweight division, that he's going to go on to reign supreme. Although, interestingly enough, Alexander Usyk's team do think that Martin Bakole is going to be the next king of the heavyweight division once Usyk retires. They think that highly of him. It's, God, I've forgotten his name now. Krasuk, Alex Krasuk. He did an interview with Boxing King Media where he plainly laid it out. He said, yeah, I think Martin Bakole is going to be the next king. And after Bakole, it's going to be Atama. And that's what Alexander Usyk said as well. He thinks Atama is going to be the next king in a couple years' time and rule the roost at heavyweight. But before then, they think it's going to be Mr. Martin Bakole. We shall see. We'll see if this gamble, and it is a big gamble, the Bakole and Billy Nelson have taken here. We'll see if it pays off. If it does pay off, if they beat Joseph Parker, yeah, it could be ushering in a new era. And Bakole beating Parker, because of the short notice, because of the long haul flight and jet lag and all sorts of other stuff he's got to deal with, that will not only put pressure on Daniel Dubois to fight Bakole, it'll also put pressure on Usyk. That's another thing as well, Matt, that I forgot to mention. Thank you for reminding me. Matt says if Bakole makes it competitive with Parker, he might be able to get a rematch and make things right. I don't think he'll get a rematch, Martin Bakole. I think, or I suspect, there will only be a one-way rematch for this fight, whereby if Parker loses, he'll get another crack at Bakole. Billy Nelson has already spoken about this. Billy Nelson has said that they're trying to put a rematch clause in the contract, in case Martin Bakole wins. So I suspect it'll be a one-way rematch clause. All right, got a weirdo in the chat. Let's just get him out of here. Going down the Diddy route. Not sure what that's all about. Jay Jones says, how many of you spoke about Boatsy Callum Smith? Yes, I did earlier on in the stream. It was the first fight I spoke about. So if you just rewind the stream, you'll hear me speak about it, as I say earlier. Ocean Blue says, be interesting to see if anyone else gets sick in the coming days. I suspect they will. Not necessarily fighters, but people attending the fight. Maybe pundits, just regular members of the crowd. Jay says, Dubois' dad probably giving him Calpol right now. The Reality Filter says, Parker will school him and stop him hyped on. Well, I don't think it would really be fair to say hyped on if that did happen. Given the short notice, no camp, long haul flight, jet lag, I don't think it would be fair to, be saying, he was only a hype job. He lost to Joseph. Come on. Preparation is everything. There's a reason that these guys do 10-week camps. If a 10-week camp didn't give you any major benefits, then nobody would do them. So, Evil Uncle Phil says, Hatman, what do you think will happen with Padley and Shakur in their fight? Shakur will win with ease. Absolute ease. That won't even be competitive. But I feel good for Josh Padley because he is a electrician in Doncaster. I was speaking to somebody who I think is from Bradford. And, Tiger, your mum's a batty, man. How about that, Tiger? Idiot. Your mum's a batty, man. You weirdos coming in. So, Padley is an electrician in Doncaster. I was speaking to somebody who I think is from Bradford, and they were saying that, the average electrician might make 40 to 45 grand a year in somewhere like Doncaster. And from what I've heard, Padley's making high six figures for Shakur Stevenson. So he'll literally be getting 15 years worth of wages for that one fight. Isn't that crazy? 15 years worth of wages for one fight. And he's found out about it completely out of the blue. He was doing some wiring in people's lofts earlier on in the week. And then somebody, gives him a call and it says, you've been offered the Shakur Stevenson fight because his opponent's pulled out. What's the money? 800 grand. 800 grand. I'm there. I'm making 45. Do you know what I mean? He's thinking I'm making 45 grand a year. And you're offering me 800 grand out the blue? I'm there. So Padley is absolutely on cloud nine right now. And if you saw him at the weigh-in, literally it's like winning the lottery. Yeah? As Self-Made said there, it's like him winning the lottery. Man can't believe his luck. Shout out to Craig, Welsh boxer. Yeah, Padley has won the lottery. He can't believe it. He's literally over the moon. And I can only feel happy for him. Do you know what I mean? Blue collar guy like that, electrician, part-time boxer, really. His whole life changed overnight. You know, crazy. Crazy. CPB says, do you think there's a risk that Shakur takes him too lightly? Even if Shakur took him lightly, I just think the levels are so vastly different between the two fighters. I don't think it's really going to matter. Shakur Stevenson is just going to blow this guy out the water. I'm not saying he's going to knock him out in a couple of rounds. I just mean like this victory will be in no way contentious or anything like that. It's going to be a walk in the park for Shakur Stevenson. Mighty Meatball says he could buy half a Doncaster with that pay. I don't doubt it. Wave says, are you more or less interested, Hatman, since the Bakole Dubois switch? More interested. Yeah, more interested. Because I was quite confident in Dubois beating Parker. But because of Bakole's lack of prep, I'm intrigued. Because Bakole with a full camp, I would pick him to beat Parker. But without a full camp, I just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm picking Parker because, again, I have to go for the guy, or go with the guy who's more well prepared. But we just don't know. We can only guess how fit Bakole is right now. Matty says, I think it's a 50-50 fight now. Yeah, we will see. CPB says, hypothetically, if Padley were to pull this off, would it be the biggest upset of the decade so far? Without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. But I can't see it at all. I don't see anything that Padley does. Padley's not a puncher. I don't see anything that Padley does that is better than Shakur Stevenson. And as Stevenson has pointed out himself, he was an Olympian. He fought in the amateurs for years and years and years, where you're fighting several times a week, opponent pullouts and all this type of stuff. So this is nothing that will knock Stevenson off kilter. An opponent pullout. It'd be like water off a duck's back to him. Shade says, who has pulled off an upset like this since Andy Ruiz? This will be a far bigger upset than Ruiz beating AJ. Way, at least in my mind, way bigger than Ruiz beating AJ. Because I gave Ruiz quite a good chance. Yeah, my pre-fight video for the Ruiz fight is still up. I was giving Ruiz a pretty good chance against AJ. I was picking AJ, but I thought, you know what? I give Ruiz a good chance in this fight. I reckon with his fast hands, with his counter punching. Yeah. So to me, it wasn't really a big upset. This would shock me. This would really shock me if Padley were to win. I'd be absolutely gobsmacked. I cannot see it at all. No way. Indeed, CPB, Ruiz was considered to be a high-level contender. Padley is not. He's not even in the top 10. I think he's like number 12 with a WBC. Somebody mentioned Munguia losing to the French guy. Yeah, this would be a lot bigger than that. That was an upset, but this would far eclipse that. Stevenson is literally one of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in boxing. Unbeaten, technically damn near immaculate, you know? Yeah, I have to agree with Afro Jam there. Shiraz was not a journeyman. Would it eclipse Buster Douglas? In some ways it would, because of the ability differential. But in terms of the impact it would have, definitely not. Because Mike Tyson was seen by the whole world as a phenom. He wasn't just looked at as a boxer. He was looked at as like a real life superhero. Like, I've never seen ever in my life before or since the type of hype around a fighter that there was around Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was a fantastic fighter, by the way. I'm not sitting there saying he was rubbish, but people got so carried away with Mike Tyson's aura of invincibility, you would not even believe it. You wouldn't believe how far people went with it. So, if ever there was a boxing reference in a movie in the 1980s, 100% of the time it was Mike Tyson. You know? Or in a television program, TV series. Boxing references would always be Mike Tyson. Oh my God, you look like you've been 12 rounds with Mike Tyson. Do you know what I mean? Mike Tyson was just ubiquitous in the 1980s and for at least half of the 1990s. He was larger than life. He was just, this invincible force. That's how people thought of him. And I'm talking about mainstream. You know, it's not like only hardcores knew about Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was as mainstream as a boxer could get. Everyone knew him. Your grandmother knew him. You know what I mean? Everybody knew the guy. So for him to lose to Buster Douglas was an absolute shocker for everybody. Not just for boxing fans, for casuals, for the average, the lady who works in the shop. Everyone was shocked that Mike Tyson got beat, particularly by a guy who most of them had never heard of before. Jimmy says, when Mike Tyson lost, it was like a close friend had died. Yeah, for a lot of people, it was. A lot of people literally went into mourning. I'm telling you, it's like they went into a state of mourning over Mike Tyson losing. Yeah, it was that deep for a lot of people. Shout out to Daniel for the super chat. He says, Hatman, where would you rank this card all time? Certain it's better than most of the Don King cards you mentioned. No, I have to disagree that it's better than most of the Don King cards I mentioned, because when people look back 20 years from now at this card, right, a new generation of boxing fans, they won't recognize a lot of the names. And so it will be easy for them 20 years or 30 years from now to look at this card and say, oh yeah, I recognize, Beterbiev and whatever and Bivol, but a lot of other guys, I don't recognize the names. Can't have been that good a card. These are names on this card that right now are at the forefront of the consciousness of boxing fans. You see it. That's why we see it as such a great card. Same goes for a lot of the Don King cards back in the days. Fans today might look back at some of those cards. I don't recognize some of these names. But at the time, these were names that were at the forefront of the consciousness of boxing fans. So, I don't know how old you are, but if you were my age or older and you were really into boxing back then, you would understand how huge those Don King cards were at the time. Many of them. And how monumental they were. It's easy with the passage of time, with people forgetting how in form certain fighters on those cards were, how exciting some of the fights that they've been in were, it's easy to just dismiss, oh, it's not as good as this Saudi card. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So I think it's way over the top to claim that this is the greatest card of all time. And the reason I say that is because you would have to have seen all the cards that have ever happened in boxing, which I can't imagine any human being on earth has ever seen all the, major cards going all the way back to, the Joe Louis era and Jack Dempsey, so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's hyperbolic to say the least. To be honest, it's the greatest card of all time. Like, come on. That's promoter talk. It's a very good card, and it's the best card we've seen in a very long time. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's better than all the Don King cards and it's greatest. It's people going overboard. Recency bias as well. Afro Jam says his best cards like the Crown Affair were just as illustrious. Yeah, if you were around during them Don King years, the Don King heyday, trust me, the cards were crazy. They were crazy. And there were fighters at the time who, as I say, were at the forefront of public consciousness. But they perhaps didn't go on to have particularly impressive careers historically. But at the time, they were hot property. Does that make sense? And it might be the same case with this card here. In years to come, do you think people are going to look back at this card, let's say 20, 30 years from now, and say, oh, wow, Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith was on it. What an incredible card. Or, wow, Zhang against Kabayel. Incredible. I don't think these fighters are going to be held in such high regard 20 or 30 years from now as they are right now. See what I'm saying? This one's got Shakur Stevenson versus Josh Padley on it. I mean, that's not a historically amazing fight. So this card won't look as impressive a couple decades down the line. But for right now, it is impressive. For the here and now, recent history, yeah, it's a very good card. Matt says, once the Saudis leave boxing, do you envision a boxing market crash? I've seen no indication at the moment that they're going to leave. They might be here to stay. The kind of investments they're making, there's this misconception, what I think is a misconception among a lot of people in the West, that the Saudis are involved in Western sports purely for the purposes of PR. I think that that is a massive, massive miscalculation and oversight. I think that a lot of people in the West do not give the Saudis as much credit as they should for being strategists with regards to, their economy, diversifying and so on and so forth. They just look at them as like stupid dictators who don't know what they're doing and they're just trying to use Western sport for PR. No. They have a plan, an economic plan. They've looked at Dubai and, their neighbors that have been successful diversifying their economies away from oil. And they're trying to follow suit. They're looking to control these sports long term. And I think long term, Turkey's actually alluded to this. Long term, the purses that the Saudis are going to pay are going to come down because they'll be looking to turn this into a profitable endeavor. So I don't think it's just about, there's an element of PR in acquiring all these Western sports. Yeah, it's an element of PR, but I don't think that's the whole game. No. That's just part of it. I think really they want this to be profitable. You see the way that Vegas, once upon a time, was just, a few buildings in the middle of the desert. And when the mob went in there, they started, because gambling was legal in Nevada, they started building all these casinos. Vegas was literally built by the mob. They started building all these casinos and all this business. And all of a sudden, this backwater in the middle of the desert became a huge destination for people all over America. Yeah? There's really nothing in Vegas. Geographically, there's no reason that anyone would want to go holiday in the middle of the flipping Nevada desert. Do you know what I mean? But they created an attraction with the gambling and the, so on and so forth. And the whole city grew up around what the mob created there. And so, same thing with the Saudis. You know what I mean? They're trying to create something which in years and decades to come will be profitable for them. They won't have to just throw money at it and lose money. No, it will start to make them money. I think that's what their plan is. With tourism and so on and so forth, and obviously Mecca, the actual Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, but they'll also have a sports Mecca there, where just like Vegas, all the big events happen in Riyadh or wherever the case may be. Okay, Julio says, talking of purses reducing, Luke Thomas reported that the UFC are challenging the Ali Act, which could apparently leave boxing in a similar position to UFC. Well, the Ali Act is only applicable in the United States. It's only ever been law in America. So the Ali Act doesn't apply in the UK anyway. And it doesn't apply in most other countries around the world with regards to boxing. It's only in America that Ali Act has ever applied. So, for those who don't know what the Ali Act is, it prevents a individual from acting as a fighter's manager and promoter at the same time. Yeah? So in America, you're not allowed to be someone's manager and also their promoter. In the UK, that's never been the case. Frank Warren promotes and manages many people. So there's never been an Ali Act in the UK. So I don't think it'll make any difference for boxing, to be honest. Outside of America, anyway. And, these Saudi shows are overseen by the British Boxing Board of Control. CPB says, I think the closest thing I've experienced to Mike Tyson sporting-wise is probably Usain Bolt, combat sports-wise, Golovkin in the 2010s or Anderson Silva in UFC. Yeah, for me, I've never seen anything like it. The only thing outside of combat sports that I could ever compare to Mike Tyson would be Michael Jordan in the NBA. When Michael Jordan was in his prime, again, a force of nature. Never seen anything like Michael Jordan in basketball before or since. Not just in terms of how good he was, but the way that he was perceived. He was a phenom. And he was a phenom at a time when there were far fewer famous sportsmen than there are today. And that's one of the reasons that these guys were lifted much higher in the public consciousness than sportsmen are in this day and age. Because people are talking about, Lionel Messi and all these. No, these guys were nowhere near what a Michael Jordan was in his prime. Not even close. Not even close. Nowhere near. Jay Jones says, bro, you're forgetting about Muhammad Ali. He was an icon even when he was alive. Yeah, Muhammad Ali, I should have said this actually, because I have said this several times before. Muhammad Ali was bigger than Mike Tyson, more of an icon than Mike Tyson at the peak of his popularity. But Mike Tyson has been more popular over the long haul than Muhammad Ali. Mike Tyson has captured whole new generations of fans long after his prime in a way that Ali didn't, not to the same extent anyway. But as popular as Ali was, I was more talking about aura of invincibility. Ali never had the aura of invincibility that Mike Tyson had. Not even close. You know, Ali had been dropped in fights, even when he was still unbeaten, by Henry Cooper, Doug Jones. There was the contentious incident in the first Henry Cooper fight. So he never had that kind of aura of invincibility. Mike Tyson's aura of invincibility is like nothing I've ever seen before or since. It was incredible. Muhammad Ahmad's Bruce Lee says, what do you think of Parker's weight? Apologies if you mentioned it. I think Parker's weight plays into Bakole's hands. I did mention it before, but yeah, I think it plays into Bakole's hands. I'm still picking Parker for the window because of Bakole's lack of prep. If Bakole had a full camp, I'd be picking Bakole, but without the full camp, I can't have confidence in his fitness. So I've got to go with Parker on points. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, it makes me a little annoyed that any boxing pendants / YouTubers keep telling me Bakole is a better pick than Dubois. Bakole is out of shape 3 days. Yeah, I'm picking Parker. I was picking Dubois over Parker, but now, yeah, I'm picking Joseph Parker to win this fight on points because of the lack of prep for Bakole. If Bakole pulls it off, as several people mentioned in the live chat earlier on, it's a terrible look for Joe Parker, isn't it? If he gets beat by a guy coming in on 3 days' notice. Wave says, Hatman, do you enjoy watching Shakur? Hell no. It's like watching paint dry. That's why I want to see him fight Tank. Because Tank might have the offense to really give us a good fight with Shakur Stevenson. He might be the only person offensively good enough to make a Stevenson fight entertaining. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, I'm not 100% on Bakole because he just showed us more that Anderson wasn't what we thought he was, more so than a good fighter. We will see, though, the only time he fought a slick guy, he lost. I watched the Bakole-Anderson fight again. I've watched it many times, but I watched it again yesterday. I urge all of you to go watch that fight, like, after this stream. It's on YouTube in, whatever it is, 4K or 1080p and 60 frames. Please go watch that fight again. Because it was actually a hell of a fight. That was a hell of a fight. Dwyer always says that knockouts cause amnesia. And we tend to just remember the knockdown in the first round and the knockdowns in the 5th round, which resulted in Martin Bakole winning. But if you go back and watch that fight, it was actually a slugfest. Both guys were getting it in. Anderson had plenty of success in the fight. He was landing nice shots in all the rounds, and he was fighting hard. He was fighting hard. He didn't just get hit, dropped, and then fall to pieces. He was fighting back with ferocity against Bakole. He was really giving it a go and trying to fight his way out of trouble. That's actually a really underrated heavyweight fight. If you go back and watch Martin Bakole versus Jared Anderson, really underrated heavyweight shootout. And I disagree again with, as somebody else has said there, I don't think Anderson was that bad at all. I just think that he underestimated Bakole. And, he's got the arrogance of youth, which can sometimes work to your advantage, but other times it can work against you. And in that instance, it worked against him, the arrogance of youth. But he was able to, other than Michael Hunter, stand and have success in the pocket against Bakole more so than anyone other than Hunter. So, no, I don't think Anderson was that bad or anything like that. I think Anderson turned up that night and he was on smoke. And he showed a lot of talent in the fight. But Bakole was just too big and strong. Clobbered him. I like the nickname that Bakole has, the Last King of Scotland. It's a reference to the former president of Uganda, Idi Amin. Right? He was a kind of stereotypical African dictator. And Bakole is like the same stature as Idi Amin. Big, tall guy with a pot belly. He's got like a jovial laugh, whereas Idi Amin's laugh was a bit more sinister. But have you ever seen Idi Amin interviews, he's literally hilarious. Now, obviously, you wouldn't have laughed in his presence because on a level, this guy was feeding people to crocodiles, right? This was a very serious individual. Literally feeding people to crocodiles like some James Bond villain. But he's dead now, so we're safe. And if you watch his interviews, they are literally hilarious. The stuff, his general demeanor, the stuff he comes out with is so funny. And Bakole has that similar kind of demeanor, a bit more of a teddy bear demeanor than Idi Amin, but similar, big, tall African guy, pot belly, dictator, coming in with an iron fist and crushing all his competition. So I like his moniker there, the Last King of Scotland. I prefer calling Bakole the African dictator rather than calling him the Last King of Scotland. Just the African dictator. He fights like an African dictator. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, correction, a prime slick fighter who wasn't 43 years old like Takam. Takam was never really slick though, right? Yeah, he hasn't fought a slick fighter, but styles make fights. So if you can't beat a slick fighter, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're no good. George Foreman, how many slick fighters did he beat? He got stopped by Ali. He got beat by Jimmy Young, who was a slick fighter, right? But George Foreman, we still consider him great, even though slick fighters always gave him trouble. Tommy Morrison beat him on the back foot. Tommy Morrison channeled whoever, Jimmy Young, when he fought George Foreman and gave him a boxing lesson. So, yeah, if you have issues with certain styles, it doesn't mean you're a bad fighter necessarily. It just, certain guys are your kryptonite. That's the way I see it anyway. So Martin Bakole can still be an elite heavyweight, a top heavyweight, without being great at dealing with slick fighters. Although if there was a rematch between Bakole and Hunter now, I'd definitely pick Bakole. Hunter has fallen literally off the face of the earth. I don't think Hunter even likes boxing. He's got quite a high ranking with the WBA, but yeah, Hunter doesn't even like boxing. Shout out to Matt for the super chat again. He says, Jared Anderson's defensive style at heavyweight is exactly why many people argue the Philly style doesn't work against the 300 pounds puncher. You may well be right. You know, there are certain technical things that you can do as a welterweight, but try that at heavyweight and a big 300-pound man will just punch right through it. Heavyweight boxing is different. Physicality matters more at heavyweight. Skills, obviously, matter the most in boxing in general. But compared to lighter weights, physicality is more important in the heavyweight division. It doesn't mean it's the be-all and end-all, as Alexander Usyk has proven. But it can have more impact. You can go further just having certain physical gifts in the heavyweight division than you could go, let's say, in the welterweight division. Okay, Matt says, simply put, I got Joe Parker for this fight. We forget that Parker lost a thin decision to Joshua. And pre-CTE, Joe Joyce was the truth, so no shame. Yeah, I got Parker winning this fight as well. But where I'll differ with you is I think that, and this is just my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think that Bakole, on form, in shape, is better than Joe Joyce ever was. Yeah, I think an in-shape Bakole is better than Joe Joyce ever was. I think he's a lot faster with his hands. I think he's got a better boxing brain. He's not amazing defensively, but he's better than Joyce defensively. I think he's a lot more creative with his offense. He throws unorthodox shots. I think he's got more gears. Joe Joyce has only got one gear. Martin Bakole's got several gears. And when he goes into his top gear, as I was saying earlier on in the stream, is actually quite frightening. You see this giant African guy. He goes into Super Saiyan mode and he's throwing everything at you for the whole round. Huge shots from every angle, uppercuts, overarms, hooks, jabs. I mean, yeah, when he goes into that top gear, Bakole's really quite impressive. So I think an in-shape Bakole is better than Joe Joyce ever was, personally. Devin, shout out to Devin. He says, the fact that Parker is coming at 276 makes me lean towards, well, he's coming at 267, not 276. I guess you've put the 7 before the 6. He's coming at 267. He says, it makes me lean towards Bakole more. If Parker was in the 240s or 50s, I would have picked him, but now I think Bakole will do him inside 5. Okay, if Bakole had a full camp, I'd agree with you. But not knowing what kind of shape he's in, and he's literally still in the air now. Yeah? The guy's going to, at the earliest, he's going to land in Saudi at 2 a.m. local time. And he's had to catch how many flights? 3 flights? There could be all kinds of delays. He might not land in Saudi till 4, 5, 6 a.m. for all we know. And then he's got to sleep for 8, probably longer than that, 10 hours. Get up, do his medicals and a bit of, media. And then he's walking into the ring. It's a crazy, it's a crazy 48 hours for Bakole. Can he really go through all that and then perform when he hasn't even had a camp? I don't know, man. It's crazy. So I got to go with Parker. Matt says, if Bakole comes in over 320, that'll be a problem for me. I think it's a problem regardless what weight he comes in at. But obviously, yeah, the heavier he is, the worse you would think it would be. But just what he's been through, even if he was guaranteed to be below 300 pounds, to me, it's still an issue. Just the prep. CPB says, who would you consider to be the closest thing to Mike Tyson today in boxing terms of their aura of invincibility? For me, it has to be Inoue. I don't know who's as close. There's no one even remotely in the same ballpark or universe today as Mike Tyson in terms of aura of invincibility. So you could say this person is the closest or that person is the closest. None of them are remotely close. None of them are not even remotely close to what Mike Tyson Mike Tyson's image was. When you look back now, it's unbelievably silly. You know, how Mike Tyson was looked at by the public. Unbelievably silly. But at the time, people just saw it as that's the way the world is. You know, there are particular things in life that are certain. And one thing is that Mike Tyson is invincible in any form of hand-to-hand combat. That was the opinion of damn near everybody. Mike Tyson is literally an invincible human being in one-on-one combat. You know, the 80s was a different kind of time. Matt says, Abdullah Mason looking like a demigod right now. But Abdullah Mason hasn't fought anybody. You know, that's the thing. So he might be looking very good, but the opposition. Lion says Bakole looked seriously fat in that photo at the airport. Yeah, let's go through some of the Martin Bakole photos again for people who missed them earlier on. So since Martin Bakole was in the air and couldn't make the weigh-in, Joseph Parker had to face off with Frank Warren. Frank Warren shoved him, you know, all jokes, obviously. But let's have a look at Bakole. So this is the photo that people are talking about. He appears to be at the airport and he's looking literally larger than an African hippo, right? Particularly from that angle, right? Huge belly and just looks crazy. But then in other photos, it doesn't look as bad because he's standing up. So the fat is stretched out, you know, when you're standing up rather than when you're crouched over like that. So there's Martin Bakole standing outside the airport. All right. There he is inside the airport again. Gucci drip. That's him standing by the Ethiopian Airlines plane. Not sure if he's about to board or whether he just came off. There he is with a big Idi Amin belly. And there he is on the plane. Is that Ethiopian Airlines version of first class or business? Plenty of leg room for the big man, but doesn't look that luxurious, does it? Giving the salute. He's a soldier, he says. Because he could have done with one of those like Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways. I'm not sure what Etihad are like. I used to fly Qatar a lot. Qatar is a fantastic airline. I love Qatar. It's like my favorite airline is Qatar. If you ain't flown Qatar, I recommend it. I used to fly Qatar Airways a lot. Yeah, he really could have done with one of those modern, you know, first class seats, which basically doubles up as a flipping bed. You know, if they have one big enough for him, he could have done with one of them. Got some sleep on the plane, you know? Whereas, I mean, I don't know. Some people can sleep anywhere. I've always found it very difficult sleeping on planes. Even with plenty of leg room and everything, it's just, I don't know, I'm not comfortable in the environment. And yeah, always found it very difficult sleeping on planes. Martin Bakole, maybe he finds it easy, you know? Maybe that's one of the reasons he took the fight. Maybe he's thinking, I sleep like a baby on a plane. No problem at all. And as I mentioned earlier on, this was a clip of Martin Bakole posted to his Instagram page on the 12th of February. Now, I don't know whether this footage was actually taken on the 12th of February or that it was just uploaded on that date. Couldn't tell you. But in this footage, he looks in pretty decent shape. If it was actually taken on the 12th of February, then yeah, he must have been overeaten to a crazy extent since he landed in Congo. But it could also disguise the level of fitness he has. Because, again, as I described earlier on in the stream, there's a difference between being aesthetically fit and being cardiovascular fit. There are some fighters, Andy Ruiz, when he's quote unquote in shape, is cardiovascular fit. He's just not aesthetically fit. And that is actually what lulls people into a full sense of security. Because they look at the shape of his body and they think, there's no way this guy can do 12 rounds. But he actually can do 12 rounds. No problem. And so if Martin Bakole was cardiovascular fit before he left Scotland and went to the Congo, he might still have that cardio fitness, even though he's piled on 10, 12, however many pounds, 20, 30 pounds. Some people can pile fat on faster than you would even believe. Yeah? It's a lot quicker to put weight on than lose it. And some people can put on 30 pounds in a very short space of time. I'm not saying Martin Bakole's done that, but just putting the possibility out there that even if he comes in 300 pounds, he might be cardio fit. We don't know. It's all speculation. If Martin Bakole is not, think about the reason that Bakole has taken this fight. Because he didn't have to take it. The Ajagba final eliminator for the IBF is there. That's guaranteed. All he has to do is beat Ajagba in May, and then he's IBF mandatory, and the IBF tend to enforce their mandatories quicker than all the other sanctioning bodies. So the likelihood is, if he'd beaten Ajagba in May, he would have either fought Dubois later on this year, or Dubois would have been stripped. Yeah? So why has he risked his position with the IBF, which guaranteed him a title shot if he beat Ajagba? He would have had a full camp for Ajagba, right? Why has he gone and risked that to take on Joe Parker at 2 days' notice? Is it purely about money? Is he that desperate for money that he needs it now rather than, wait until later on in the year? Or is it that he's actually in better shape than we realize? Is it that he genuinely believes that all of this stuff, traveling, making this long haul journey last minute isn't going to bother him? What's the thought process of Martin Bakole right now? Should the fact that he's willing to take this fight and that he's confident, ostensibly, give us confidence in him? What do you guys think? M says it's for the money, let's be real. Iron Mikey says, the plague outbreak in Congo. They do have plague in Congo. Somebody's laughing there. No, they actually do have bubonic plague in parts of Africa still. And they also have leprosy in many parts of Africa. They still have leper colonies in Africa. But Congo is a massive country. So when people are talking about, oh, there's a war in Congo, like, Congo is enormous. No, there's a war in a certain part of Congo. But it's an enormous country. Other parts of Congo, I'm sure, are completely peaceful. It's not like a nationwide war. People are saying he's getting a bucket load of money. Yeah, he surely is. But does he need that money? He would have got a lot of money for fighting Dubois. IBF mandatory gets like 30% or whatever. Now, that is a point that somebody raised in my Element group. Thank you for bringing it to my consciousness once again. The preloader says, Could it be tied to Atama getting a shot at Dubois? Uncle Bricktop pulling strings. I don't think this situation has all been orchestrated to bring that situation about that you just described. But it opens up the possibility for it, doesn't it? Dubois has to become heavyweight champion before a certain date in May. I forget which particular day it is. It might be halfway through May. So if they could all of a sudden arrange Itama versus Dubois before that date, it would sell. It would massively sell. Not just because Dubois is coming off the win over AJ and because Itama is being highly thought of and regarded and he's this young guy, he's got the young people behind him. But even more so if you promote it based on the fact that if Itama wins, he breaks Mike Tyson's record. It will be huge. So this situation does now open up the opportunity for that. And I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Itama get the opportunity to make history. Lionheart says, they say Dubois has got 90 days to defend his title. I've only heard that from Spencer Oliver, so I don't know whether to believe it yet. I want to hear it from someone sensible or preferably from an official source like the actual sanctioning body, the IBF. Because right now it's just coming from Spencer Oliver from what I've heard, and he's a wally, so... All right, peeps, I'm going to wrap this one up right here. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this live stream, and a special shout out to everybody who donated via Super Chat. Will I be doing a watch along for the fights? I hope so, but it depends how hectic my day is. As I understand it, this card is going to be starting very early, right? Very early. So if I do a watch along, I don't know whether I'll be doing it for all of them. But, yeah. Much appreciated that you guys have joined me again for this stream. And I will catch you tomorrow at some point. Okay? So be good. Take care. I'll see you on the other side.